I love hearing kids tell the Christmas story. They repeat words, they stumble over words, they mispronounce words, they make up words along the way. And honestly, I understand the struggle. Because the Christmas story, it's so big and it's so powerful and it's so transformative that it can be really difficult to tell in concise words. But this week, I challenged myself to do that because usually even when I'm telling the Christmas story, I can get a little tongue-tied, use too many words, overcomplicate a story that was intended to be very, very simple. And so I wanted to use as few words as possible. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before, but some of the most powerful stories ever told use very few words. Like in just a few words, your heart can be stirred up. A tear can be in the corner of your eye. You could be scooted to the edge of your seat in anticipation of what's going to be said next. Using very few words, you just have to use the right words. For instance, I have a book on the shelf in my office. It's called 6-Word Memoirs, Stories of Love and Heartbreak. And these stories, they're really short. They're 6 words, but they're so powerful. They're breathtaking, and some of them are heartbreaking. Listen to just a few of these stories, just 6 words. They wrote this: marriage, children, empty nest, now what? The whole story. Someone wrote this story. She wrote, kissed many frogs, finally found Prince. I think that says it all. About this story here, she wrote, hired me, fired me, married me. I want to hear more of that story. Just one more, and you need to think about this. When someone wrote this story, my marital advice, marry an orphan. Some of you will get that later. I'll explain it to you after the service, okay? Some of the most powerful, they're like, oh, I get it. That's mean. Some of the most powerful stories require very few words. And Christmas is the most powerful story. In fact, I'd ask you this question, that if you had to tell the Christmas story in just 6 words, I wonder what 6 words you would say. Now, given the opportunity to think about it a little more, some of you may tell the story this way, like no extra rooms, baby in barn, or men followed star, arrived at manger, or maybe this one, young woman, very pregnant, road trip. Like all of those are examples of how you could capture a lot of the essence of the Christmas story. But I said, I want to capture all of the essence of the Christmas story in just 6 words. And so no further ado, here's the 6 words to tell the Christmas story. All was lost, hope was found. Now, you probably think, hey, you left out some details. You left out the manger and the stars and the camels and the donkeys and the sheep and the shepherds and like Mary and Joseph. Yeah, I know all that. And those details, they would all be included in a much longer telling of the Christmas story because they're part of it. But the meaning of Christmas, the purpose of Christmas, the power of Christmas is really captured in just those 6 words. It's all was lost, hope was found. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to cheat a little bit and use a few more words at least to describe why I would choose those 6 words, because it's very, very important that no one in here misses the Christmas story. So why would I begin the Christmas story by saying this, all was lost? Because all was lost. Years before Jesus ever came, all was lost. And all was not lost gradually, all was lost instantaneously. And the day I don't know, the hour I can't tell you, but the moment I can tell you about. There was a man and a woman. It was actually the first man and the first woman. They were known as Adam and Eve, and they were living together in a garden. And not just any garden, but it was the garden. It was called the Garden of Eden. I don't know how much you do or don't know about the Garden of Eden, but the Garden of Eden, man, it was a sheer paradise. It would have made any garden you've ever walked through, seen, grown up on your own, absolutely pale in comparison. Every direction you looked was eye-popping colors and soul-stirring scents. There was luscious fruit hanging everywhere you looked, well within reach. Animals of every kind were everywhere you looked. Some of them were frolicking through the fields. Others were laying quietly in the shade from the tree. None of the animals were behind bars or in cages. They were free, and so was everything else. All of creation was free. And all of creation was full. It was full of life. It was full of purpose. It was full of joy. It was full of freedom. There was reason to laugh and dance. There was so much reason to celebrate and smile. Opportunity and possibility abounded. There was no reason for sadness or gloom. Nothing was impossible to achieve or experience. Creation existed in perfect harmony with one another, but more importantly, creation existed in perfect harmony with God until it didn't. In a specific moment, a dreadful moment, a regrettable moment, these two people, Adam and Eve, man and woman, they decided that something was missing, that they wanted something more. And so, tempted by an evil one, the evil one, they were convinced that God was holding something back. And so then deciding to want more, to have more, to get more and experience more, they decided to turn on God. See, God had given them endless list of do's, almost complete freedom to do anything. He just gave them one don't. He said, hey, whatever you do, don't eat from the fruit of that one tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or you will surely die. They knew the tree. He had clearly shown them. And so their decision was not a mistake. It was a choice. It was a choice to turn on God and away from God. And so she, and then eventually he took a bite, expecting to experience nothing but more gain. And what they instead experienced was loss. They didn't lose something. They lost everything. All was lost. Joy was lost. Purpose was lost. Freedom was lost, and all is a very inclusive word to describe what was lost in that moment. But if I was narrowing it down again to a word for you, what was lost? Hope was lost. Again, hope was lost. Hope is like oxygen for our souls. Without it, you can't live well and you won't live very long. And in that moment, and every moment from then moving forward, hope was elusive. It was just always a bit out of reach because hope, it cannot be manufactured or contrived or imagined. Hope was lost completely. These people that have been made by God, to be like God, to exist with God, they were now alone. They were on their own. Because God, in a sense, when this rebellion was chosen, he took this cosmic-sized step back from rebellion, back from evil, and back from sin. And so these people, life became a struggle. It became a burden. It became a challenge for them. Dreams were crushed and replaced with nightmares that occurred, not just at night, but in the day, all day, and every single day. People toiled, but with no noticeable gain. And so years passed, and times changed, and population multiplied, and cultures developed. At times, these people would form these gods with their hands because they needed one. Other times, their hands would reach to the heavens trying to get to God, but they couldn't quite touch him. They couldn't get to him. There were certainly hints of God, and there was even some obvious signs of God in his presence, but God continued to be farther at a distance than when everything had begun. God was at a distance. And so hope was at a distance because where God is, hope is. And so if humanity was ever to experience hope again, real, lasting, deep, meaningful hope, they needed God to draw nearer than he ever had before. And he did. The day I don't know, the hour I'm not sure, the moment I can tell you about. You would expect the arrival of God to be marked with pomp and circumstance of every kind. You would expect when God shows up that he'd be surrounded by the most well-equipped security force money could ever hire. You would expect God that he would have reservations at a five-star resort like the Breakers, and the red carpet would be rolled out when he arrived, flashbulbs popping. Of course, none of that was the case. The moment began when an angel visited this young and poor and uneducated Jewish young girl named Mary. I'm telling you, there was nothing spectacular about her, really. If she was in this crowd, you wouldn't be able to point her out. Nothing about her on the exterior would have made her stand out, but something on the interior of her caused God to say, she is the one that she is the one that is going to facilitate my arrival into this world as a baby. You hear that, but Mary was chosen, and she was the one that had the pleasure and the privilege of carrying God until his moment of arrival came. And then the moment came. When the moment came, Mary was not in the familiar confines of her home where you would want to be. or a local hospital where everything is safe and clean. Instead, Mary and her future husband, Joseph, they were on a required road trip. A census was being taken, and everyone was told, you've got to return to your hometown, and in this period of time, you've got to be there or else. And so they went. And for him and for them, that meant going to this unsuspecting, small, overlooked village named Bethlehem. And it was when they were there that the moment came. And there was no shelter. No vacancy is what they were told. Apparently, all the rooms and all the spaces were taken up by people that were wealthier and more dignified and more important than them. And so we don't know the exact setting where the moment came, but we do believe the setting was better designed for a goat than for a God, and it was there in that setting that God arrived. A quick delivery, perhaps. A delivery that seemed to would never end. Seemed like it would never end, maybe, but in that moment, God was delivered, if you can imagine that. That he came out of the warmth of her womb and he ended up in the warmth of her arms. And as some of you experienced, she held him in her arms until her arms ached, and then Joseph did the same, and then they gently laid him in a manger. I could describe Jesus' coming in a lot of different ways, using short phrases. We could say peace snuck in, or joy broke out, or love came down. But I really do believe what captures it the most is that hope showed up. And we're where we started, that all was lost and hope was found. It was shortly after his birth. We don't know exactly when, but these men called the Magi, or the wise men, they took this very long trip to find this babe. And when they showed up, they brought him these seemingly priceless gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And yet all of their gifts paled in comparison to the gift that the baby showed up bearing, the gift of hope. And the hope wasn't in a box wrapped up with the bow on top. The hope was wrapped up in a little tiny little blanket, because hope is not something Jesus gives. Hope is something Jesus is. When Jesus came, hope was restored. Not only had God come close again, but he came closer than he'd ever been before. Like you could see him and you could hear him and you could touch him. He could be known. And Jesus came, he came to restore what had been lost, to rebuild what had been torn down, to resurrect the full, deep life that he created in the very beginning. He came to make hope readily available to anyone and everyone. And I do mean everyone and anyone who would possibly accept. And yes, listen, all have been lost, but on that first Christmas morning, hope was found, lying in a manger. The Christmas story can be told a lot of different ways by a lot of different people using a lot of words or a few, but no matter how you tell the real story of Christmas, it is absolutely a story of hope. And so my simple question for you is this, have you ever experienced the hope of Christmas? What I'm asking is, have you ever let the story of Christmas impact your day, not just a day, but every one of your days? Have you ever come to the realization that Jesus' coming had everything to do with you? That you're not an innocent bystander in this wonderful, breathtaking story of Christmas, like your name is written into the script, that it was your name and your face and your needs and your brokenness and mine that was on the mind of God when he wrote the story in heaven. God didn't write the story of Christmas just so you could get a beautiful tree and put up the lights and drink eggnog and shop until you drop, as fun as all of that is. He came so you and I could have what we all desperately need the most. Hope. You feel it, don't you? A stirring, a whisper, a tear. We all need hope. And today's not different than that day, that hope can't be manufactured, it can't be contrived, it can't be imagined. Hope can only be experienced. And God knew up in heaven that if he was gonna restore everything that had been lost, that he would have to send from heaven to earth, not something, but someone. And he sent his son. And so we say it this way around here, that hope has a name, Jesus. And so when I ask you, have you ever experienced the hope of Christmas? What I'm actually asking you is, have you ever experienced the love of Jesus? Have you ever allowed him to get out of the manger and into your life? Or are you saying, maybe not even with words, that there is no vacancy here? He's heard that before. And would Jesus it's not about finding space in your life for him. It's about learning to find your life in him. He is more than you could ever want, and he is absolutely everything you need. What most of you want more than anything, and what we all need more than anything, is hope, and hope is readily available because Jesus is readily available. And if you've never done so before, this Christmas, allow Jesus to do what he came to do, to restore inside of you everything that needs to be restored. I'm saying to unleash hope in your life. Jesus' ability to unleash hope in your life is not just because he came, it's because he did what he came to do. He came and lived, and then he died, because according to God's plan, we don't know why it was this way, but he's God and we're not. And so according to God's plan, it was Jesus' very life that was required to bridge that gap, to restore that closeness and intimacy again with Creator and creation. And Jesus, he did. He showed up in that wooden manger. He died on that wooden cross. And every time we gather as a church, even today on Christmas Eve, every time we gather as a church, we take time, we carve out time, we plan the time ahead of time to remember what Jesus did on the cross, his death. And we remember that with this meal that is called communion. It's there in your seats in front of you. It's juice and bread, which represents the blood and body of Jesus. And when we take this meal, understand it's not a somber remembrance. We're not at a funeral. It is a joyous celebration that Jesus did what he came to do. And then because he did, we're able to say, all was lost and hope is found. And so I want to invite you, if you're someone that loves Jesus and you know he loves you, take this meal, it's a little juice and a little piece of bread, and go ahead and you can eat the bread, remembering his life and his death that he gave for us. And as we drink the juice, which represents the blood that he shed on the cross for us, we're being reminded that there's hope again. Not because it's what Jesus gives, because it's who he is. So let's drink this juice as we celebrate his goodness and his life together. Let me pray for us. Jesus, we are so thankful that you came. We're so amazed that though everything was indeed lost because of our brokenness and rebellion, you didn't let the story end that way. You restored hope and restored purpose and restored life. And we celebrate that moment that you arrived in this world, but we know you came in a manger, but more so you came on a mission. You came to live, but you also came to die so that people like us that are broken and flawed and wrecked could be restored into a relationship with the one true God. And that is the most incredible gift we could ever be given. God, thank you for the gift of hope. And may everyone know in this place and beyond this place that hope's available to everyone because Jesus is available to everyone. Thank you, Jesus, for coming. Thank you for Christmas, which is such a vivid reminder of what you came to do. And we pray this in Jesus' name.